So this is great to have everyone back again for the fourth episode of the podcast St. Tammy. I'm really excited to connect with you, Keith, and Helen and Jay. I think this is going to be a really good conversation. I'm just really excited about it.
Yeah, awesome. So we were really lucky to talk to Keith Chamberlin today. We kind of, through this podcast, want to connect with sort of like real life people who, obviously Jay, you, Tammy, but to share their kind of, he's a real life person as well, but to share their memories and experiences and to talk about this wonderful person firsthand. So Keith, because you were just talking a bit before we started officially recording, you were talking about coming to work at PTL, but I think your story with Tammy started even earlier, because am I right in thinking that you had been in the audience as a child when they were recording Come On Over at CBN? Is that right?
No, I was never at CBN. I saw Jim and Tammy first when they were doing on the evangelistic field here in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. And we first saw them at Faith Temple in the Greenville, South Carolina area, which is Jimmy and Joanne Thompson's church, who now have their own television network. Thanks to Jim and Tammy, I don't think most people know exactly how the Dove Broadcasting Network came about, but Jim and Tammy used to own that name, the Dove Broadcasting Network. And when they left CBN to go to California, they gave that name to Jimmy and Joanne, and they started the Dove Broadcasting Network. And so that's the first location I first saw Jim and Tammy. And then because my father was a gospel singer and that my parents were in the ministry, they were in different churches all the time. And, when these churches would have revivals, they would have gospel singers in also. And we'd be in some of the churches where Jim and Tammy were holding revival. And, sometimes my dad's group would be the music of the revival.
Oh, wow.
But then there was other times when we would just go see Jim and Tammy at these revivals in these different churches in North Carolina, mostly in North Carolina, but sometimes in South Carolina. And Tammy would just do the music, and she'd play the accordion. And I remember the accordion especially, yeah.
That's cool.
That had to be what, in the 70s, in the early 70s or late 60s?
Let's see. No, it was like the early 60s. I believe this was early 60s.
Yeah,
okay.
Was this the period before, so when they were kind of being traveling evangelists, before they even got their start on TV? Because there was a period where they were going around the States in a trailer, essentially, and holding these revivals. Was it kind of as early as that?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was before CBN.
So it was like they were in the Airstream trailer and all that.
I don't remember their trailer, but I know they were pulling a trailer. I don't remember what it was, but let's see. I know some churches probably put them in hotels if they wanted one. I'm not sure about that, but that's how it's usually done. But,
back then my mom said they used to order off the menu by looking at the price to see what was cheapest before they look at
Hey, I still do that.
Right. That's right, because sometimes churches that don't always help out the minister well. When they come through. So
yeah, but it's interesting that this was a time when they were kind of developing their ministry. They had been young kind of Bible school dropouts. And this is before they even became these massive TV culture personalities, had a huge ministry on PTL, and then Tammy became so well known in her own right. So this is, it's an interesting phase, a period of time, and also just in terms of America, that this was a time when people were attending. Was this I know that your ministry itself is not Assemblies of God, but was this a sort of Pentecostal thing that they were?
Well, my mother was Pentecostal. My dad is Baptist, and so we was in a lot of different type of churches, and I ended up being Episcopalian because I have friends who are Episcopalian, and my family actually started off as Episcopalians, but my dad's side of the family, but migrated to the Baptist. But I remember, for me, Tammy was always a big star. Like I was telling
PK.
PK, thank you. Tammy, to me, was always, there was something dynamic about her all the time. And the Spirit of the Lord was always upon her, I felt, especially in those days, because you could just feel the love coming through her. And Jim also, but especially through Tammy, because she was most sensitive to the Holy Spirit. It seemed to me that she was more sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and she would be able to call out words of wisdom, we call it, in charismatic and Pentecostal circles, where she would just know something about someone, and it was, the Lord would be speaking to her, and she could pull someone out of the audience and minister to them, And she always had this dynamic kind of magnetism about her, and also her personality along with that, just really just drawed you into her. And that's why I could remember her from a very early age, even after I got away from the church myself. At times I would still remember that period of time in my life when I was in my late teens. And then later on, like I had told Kike, that I had moved to Charlotte after my parents' divorce, because my dad was living there and I was going to school there at UNC. And actually Norman, Jim's brother, was just living a few doors up from us on Murray Hill Drive. I don't know if you remember this, Jay, but where Norman and Dorothy used to live, but we lived just a few doors down from them on Murray Hill Drive. So I hope that answered your question, Helen. Well,
yeah, no, it's super interesting, because I guess it's just sort of we've talked about Tammy from different angles. We had a college professor last week talking about Tammy's historical relevance and her kind of cultural impact and stuff. So it's really interesting just to hear the kind of real life lived experience as well. I'd love to hear as well, I don't know what everyone else thinks, but about what it was like working at PTL.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be really interesting.
PTL was my all-time favorite job.
Really?
Have you ever had the type of job you just couldn't wait to get up in the morning and get to work? Right. I wish it was like that now, but you never knew what was going to happen. You always got, your spirit always got fed. Just the people coming from all over the world and nation. You never knew who you was going to meet, but it was just the presence of the Lord was there, and there was peace there, and there was joy there. And it wasn't like the Christianity I initially grew up in, where, you had to be kind of sad, it seemed, or it seemed like people were always dealing with some kind of misery in their life. And but Jim and Tammy presented the gospel in such a way that they made it fun to serve the Lord and help you learn how to live that way. And that's what was left on me, was how to minister to other people, how to share the joy of the Lord, and not be, and just to give your cares over to the Lord. It was an amazing time for me. And I didn't make a lot of money there. I don't think anyone really did. And I don't think Jim and Tammy really did. They made a good living, but, they didn't, it's not like a lot of people thought, that they got very wealthy, but it was a good time in my life, and one that has carried on into what I'm doing today. And I really wish Tammy was here, because I would really love to show her and tell her about what I've been doing in the last 20 some years, And I was just getting into it just as she was getting sick again, and passed away, So
it was interesting, because I remember kind of, I think what you're saying resonates with me so much, because feel like that's what my parents grew up with, similar like how you did, is where it was like everybody was either like miserable or you walk, you know, and I feel like a lot of churches are still this way. I mean, I haven't been into a normal church in a long time. It's not in a bar, but you kind of walk in and you kind of feel like you're a guest at somebody else's house. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's really like a nice, and you've got, you know, and like you're a child and told to be on your best behavior, you know, and you kind of walk in and it's like, oh, and you know, is this reverence or is this fear? What is, you know, am I supposed to be somber? And I think my parents just were like, both of them realized like this isn't a way to live. Like if you're going to have a life that's full of faith, like this might work once a week, but this isn't going to work, you know, 7 days a week, feeling constantly miserable or like you're, you know, I guess at some fancy place. You know, you've got to feel like it's your home and that it's your life, you know, and that life is worth living. And I think that was kind of their like rebellion in a way. Like, you know, if they were rebelling against anything, they were rebelling against that like ho hum, somber, you know, you have to be, you know, you have to continuously suffer. Not that there's always going to be suffering. And I think that was the reality they knew, is that life is suffering. There's tough times in life. So, you know, take those great joyful moments that you can, you know.
Can I ask, maybe this is a question for Jay or Keith, and I've never really thought about this, but do you think part of why they had so much criticism was a type of envy of their joy and the type of, you know, full life that they were sort of promoting? Because I think there's so many people right in the culture that want to live in a type of misery. Do you think that was a part of what people were pushing against, even if they wouldn't like verbalize that?
I do. I feel that a lot of people were actually jealous of the success of their ministry and of their personality and gifts that the Lord had given them. They used the gifts that the Lord gave them very, very well. And, you know, the Lord will give gifts to people, but it's up to you to use those gifts and to use them wisely. And I believe that Jim and Tammy did use theirs very well, and were gifted also, and they used their gifts that they were just naturally born with to enlarge the kingdom of God, you know. And so yeah, I think, you know, that they did do very well with what they had and were given, you know. So,
you know, they didn't feel like I also feel like a lot of religious people felt like there was this constant need for critique of others. And I think they just realized like that's, you know, making other people feel bad isn't good news.
No,
you know,
there was a lot, you know, Jay, like when I was growing up, there was a lot of rules and regulations. You had to dress a certain way, you had to act a certain way, you couldn't do anything basically. Some denominations did not watch TV, and if you were able to watch TV, you couldn't watch certain type of programs. I mean, and I look back on it now, and these were innocent kind of programs, you know. But there was just too many. Jim and Tammy presented the gospel in such a way that you could just be yourself. You know, just be yourself and let God deal. If there's anything in your life, the Holy Spirit can burn it out of your life, and He does it in such a way that there's, what is it that they call it, when a drug addict is trying to break free,
withdrawals.
Yeah, there's like no withdrawals from it. You know, you're just free from it. The Lord will help you become free. That's what you're free of sin. He can change you if there's sin that in your life that He wants to deal with, you know, and it's not something that's going to make you unhappy. It's going to make you very happy. It's going to make you very joyful. He sets the captive free, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like a life affirming. I think that's what separated a lot of people, is that they, you know, it's funny because I've done church a lot of my years of my life, and you kind of, when you get into a 1 day a week thing versus like a community of being in other people's lives, and if you're not affirming life, then people aren't living. You know what I mean? And you have to affirm life, and you have to let people live well. I mean, if you're constantly like, I'm watching you, or oh, I didn't see you on Sunday. I mean, it wasn't the type of thing that it's funny because I think I got this from my parents, not even really verbally as much as just like watching them, is that this idea of you have to live your life. You have to go through, it's not just Sunday. You have to go through Monday to Saturday. You've got to live, and you got to live well, and live life on life's terms, and allow, like, my mom would say, it was like, it's up to God or the Holy Spirit to convict you. It's not, my job isn't to make you feel bad. My job isn't to judge you. There's enough of that in the world. It's when she would say that often the church is more of a courtroom than a hospital, and it should be a place where we're kind of affirming each other, building each other up. And I think that's what, ultimately may have hurt them as well in the end, because so many people were, you get caught in that, that wanting to just be negative. And I think for a lot of pastors and preachers, guilt, they're not all trained leaders. So they use a lot of guilt and manipulation and kind of lord over you. And, I think my folks were just saying enough is enough. This isn't how we're going to live, and it's funny because as I think about it, even is not just like how the church was that way, but how like the media became that way for my parents. Like, it was like, somebody always felt like they had to be the peeking in and the spying on the freedom, and, oh, we're going to watch you, and I think that was a constant struggle for my parents, is to let, for them to feel free in life, but also help other people to feel free in their own spirituality. And that was what was cool about PTL. I remember meeting people who were Catholics, and people who were Lutherans, and people who were Mormons, and people who were Baptists, and people who were like evangelicals, and people who were, like dressed in like, dressed in like long dresses down to their ankles. I mean, everybody came to PTL,
Yeah, that was everybody from every denomination there. Catholics, Amish, I even saw Amish there.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, and Mennonites. There was even several Mennonites.
Yeah, the Mennonites are who I was thinking of. Yeah. They
working at PTL.
Really?
It was the kind of it was really inclusive. It was kind of like before the non-denominational thing became hip.
Okay. Yeah.
It was just kind of like everybody's welcomed here, and you don't have to be a Christian, but if you're a Christian, you don't have to be a type of Christian. And I think there was so much of that. You have to be, not only do you have to have your life together, you have to have the right type of life together. You have to have the right Christianity, you have the right denomination. And my parents, I really felt like, did something that you don't see a lot of people do, is they really were true believers. Like, they really trusted, like, God would figure that stuff out, and that, believers have Jesus in common, and that's enough. And that was the interesting thing, is seeing my parents always kind of, that's why my mom could move through so many, she could be at the LGBTQ bookstore, and then be at, singing at a Christian university the next week, she could just, and then at a woman's prison and things like that. It's because people were people. And there wasn't really there wasn't anything to make that different. When everybody else is trying to put everybody in categories, I felt like my parents were just constantly trying to take away categories.
Right.
But it's interesting what you said, Kiki, about like how, their enjoyment, their ability to have fun and to openly have fun could be seen by many groups as a threat, and possibly was part of the reason why obviously these guys were unfortunately cancelled, so to speak,
right,
before their time. But also the fact that PTL and Heritage were so popular, aside from this sort of more ideological aspect in terms of like wider culture and needing to eradicate, sort of some social forces needing to eradicate this enjoyment in this group of people, but people in general loved it. It was extremely popular.
yes.
I mean, there was a statistic I was looking at the other day in terms of the number of households that watched PTL at its peak in 1987, and it was shown in sort of 40 different countries.
Wow.
And it was Heritage was the third biggest sort of holiday destination in this in the US after Disneyland and Disney World. It's and did you kind of experience that, Keith, at PTL, that it was, you know, so I think it's really hard for people to understand how impactful this place was, how many people it employed, how many people visited, how big it was.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of people there all the time, but especially on the holidays, like the 4th of July or Easter services. You know, I mean, the place would just be crawling with people, and you'd have, especially during holidays, you couldn't drive your vehicle through the park. You know, you had to wait for a tram, and sometimes you have to wait for the tram to go through 3 or 4 times before you could get on it, because there would be hundreds of thousands of people there, you know.
Wow.
And and the restaurants were always crowded. You know, there was Susan Alley's, there was the amphitheater snack bar that later became McMoose's, and I worked there at one time at the snack bar, and we'd have circles around the restaurant there at the amphitheater, and people just waiting to order a quick hamburger or hot dog, you know. And same thing at the Wagon Wheel. And then later on, when the hotel got built, they were constantly busy. You know, the place is just buzzing all the time. And Christmas, oh man, that was the big one, you know, because of the Christmas lights and stuff. You could spend hours stuck on Interstate 77 just trying to get off the interstate to get towards Heritage USA. So yeah, it was very popular, and there was a lot of people there all the time, you know, all through the year, not just the holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, they had to open up a back street for the employees to get in.
That's right. For that.
Yeah, because nobody could get it. Like, it's like, it was one thing. It's like, well, these people here, and nobody can get to work.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I remember that. Yeah.
So Keith, I have a question for you. Oh, go ahead, Helen.
No, you go for Kiki.
Okay. Yeah. So I was thinking, there's this great poet, Maya Angelou, and, you know, she says, people will probably forget what you say to them, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
And I've kind of thought about that for Tammy Faye. I mean, obviously I never knew her, but I'm curious, as someone that worked with her, you know, how would she make you feel? Was she somebody that would leave an impression on people kind of at that emotional level, as far as you could tell?
Myself, well, yeah, I was always happy to see Tammy, because she was always seemed to be happy. Most of the time, I saw her at times when she was sad. You know,
sure.
I knew when things were bothering her, but being out in public with her, away from Heritage USA, I was with her and Roe at times in Gatlinburg long after PTL, and also other places with her and Jim. She was the one everyone went to. Jim kind of got pushed off to the side.
Yeah.
Tammy was kind of like, I don't want to call her a star, because I don't really consider her a star. I mean, she was just an amazing person, amazing, wonderful person. I don't like that word star. It just doesn't feel right to me for her. She was so much more than that.
She was really full of life. Yeah.
She was full of life. And I remember times, you know, when, you know, people would be talking to her, and, you know, they may not be dressed all that well, or especially the women, and would have jewelry on that was kind of old and tarnished. And they may make a comment about Tammy's rings or earrings or something like that. And she would take them off and give them to her. Give to the people, you know. And I mean, she was very generous all the time. I remember one time, this is after Jim and Tammy had been separated. Everybody knows about this, so I'm not exposing anything. But Tammy had come back from California, and Jay probably remembers this time in his life where the house at TKK had been purchased. At first, I had heard that was going to be used as a sabbatical house for ministers, but then at some point it changed over, and it was going to be the parsonage for Jim and Tammy. And so they were moving in, and I was there, and there was trucks there moving their things in, and there was this washer and dryer that was on the truck, and Tammy was out there in the driveway. their driveway went down a big hill, and it seemed big at the time. It probably really wasn't all that big.
It was a big hill. That hill. I remember the first time we went down. I mean, it could be scary. I used to go down with my bicycle, and it was pretty scary.
Oh wow, yeah, I can imagine.
We always called it the big hill. So
yeah, it seemed to be big even as a young man at that time. But
yeah.
Tammy was directing people as to where to take things, and this washer and dryer was on the truck, and all of a sudden Tammy said, wait a minute, don't take that in. And she just stood there for a moment, and then she said, give it to this guy here, who was a security guard. The security guard and his wife were expecting a child, and he told us, that they had been praying for a washer and dryer, that they couldn't afford one. And all of a sudden, here Tammy is giving them one, and thinking back about that moment, and how she was reacting, I could see that the Lord was speaking to her spirit at that time to give it to the security guard that was there. And so she was very generous. She always was loving and kind to people, even when she was very tired. I was with her at times after she got sick, this last time, and she would always try to be, when people would try to engage her, she would, try to be engaging back, even though I knew she really did not feel like talking to anyone, but she was always thoughtful of how other people felt and how they may be looking at her, because, that they wanted to talk to her, and she did love people. She really, really, truly loved people from all walks of life, the gays and straights and Baptists.
Even Baptists.
I was like, even the
Baptists. She was just a remarkable lady, really. I miss her greatly. I think of her every day still.
Yeah.
How would you say has Tammy inspired the work that you do now, Keith, in terms of ministry?
Oh wow, that's a really good question. That's a deep question too. And she's had a huge impact upon my life. She led me to the Lord, first of all. I mean, I grew up in church, but she is the one who actually led me to the Lord. And and there was others who were involved in it too, Jim, and then my dear friend, Father Fulton Hodge, who helped me later on in ministry and stuff. But she helped me to look beyond what you see on the outside. She helped me to look on the inside of people, and taught me how to walk in the Spirit. And to be able to do that, you really have to spend a lot of time with the Lord in prayer and reading His Word. But I work with the Arabic Muslim people now. That's where my ministry is focused on. And if it hadn't been for Tam, if I had come to know the Lord, say through the Baptist faith or some other faith, I don't know that I would be doing the kind of work I'm doing now, because she was so open, and she showed me how to be open to people and how to not judge people, and that we don't know what someone else is going through or how they were raised to act and be the person they are. So she helped me to really be open to people. And so I don't know how to say it any better than that. It's just, she just helped me to be open to people from all walks of life, basically, And the Arabic Muslim, she helped me to be a true friend to people too. I need to say that. She really taught me how to be a true friend to people, and not to be a fair weather friend, where you just walk away when people are having a hard time. You stay with them and be a true friend to them, even in their darkest hour.
And this
Absolutely.
is where I think she has something to teach us today, you know, whether it's in the church or I'm thinking the larger world, to grow and being open to people and just being a good friend. I think those qualities are missing, at least in our culture, and just things that I think we could recover and be in a better spot.
Right. That's true.
I mean, she
Yeah.
was always there for people in tough times. And that was the interesting thing, to see her have to go through that, sometimes her own tough times, sometimes, you know, feeling alone. I think that was one thing that she like instilled in me was, you know, there's no, you know, it's just the whole fair weather, like, you know, when people are hurting, when people are down, when people have confessed something to you or done something wrong, is the times that they need you the most. And I always, you know, it's funny because hearing these stories as we've been doing this stuff and working on our documentary, you know, it's like, you know, realizing how many things that I was like, you know, oh, I was just born a nice guy, you know, but then realizing like how much that my mother like just put into my life just from watching her with other people.
Right. Yeah.
But it's true. It's interesting because it's like, you know, today it feels like the era is marked by this kind of enemy making, oppositional way of relating to people. And I think it's a lot to do with the way social media affects how far we're divided as people and how we don't have sort of real interpersonal connections. And then you've got the sort of Christian notion of a neighbor who acts in, you know, in a neighborly way to people around them and acknowledges maybe differences, but also is, you know, polite and not and, you know, caring of the other. But almost Tammy's going further with this sort of position of the friend, where she's a friend to everybody. And she has one of her books, Run to the Raw. It's not that she just kind of witnesses something and doesn't judge it. You know, she really went there and was there when it really got difficult. And despite, you know, sometimes it can be dangerous to be a friend to other types of people who are very different, not just in terms of, you know, the other group rejecting you, but in terms of the group that you're in rejecting you for reaching out to that other group, even though, you know, in Christian terms, that's really what the Bible asks.
Yeah, loving your enemy. Yeah.
Yeah. So
wait, what?
Yeah. When you love your enemy, you know, that's one thing, but when you start loving other people's enemies, then you go, oh, things get a little bit.
Yeah, but it's tricky. Obviously, there's this idea of, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend and all this kind of stuff. But this, you know, which is not, this is a very oppositional thing to think.
Yeah.
And in a sense, this idea of the Good Samaritan completely obliterates that. But, you know, even politically and on a kind of sometimes a sort of form of quote unquote politics that casts itself as, you know, the right side of history type of stuff will say, you know, those who aren't with me are against me. You know, it's really kind of this oppositional mindset instead of the reaching out to those who aren't with me, or, you know, maybe that there's a sort of dialectical relationship between you and the person who you're oppositional with, and that, yeah, there's just a whole different way of approaching this kind of dichotomy. And I think Tammy really did that, and it was not easy for her to do.
So here's a question for the three of you. You know, Keith, a moment ago you said you don't see her as a star. I'm curious how she saw herself, and I'm sure that probably changed throughout the years. But I have a sense she probably wouldn't have seen herself as a star. I know Jay, you've said she wouldn't see herself as a saint, but I'm curious how she did see herself. Do you guys have a sense of that?
Yeah, we kind of had a conversation on that one time.
Okay.
She said she never sought to be famous, you know, or anything like that. She just it just opened up to them, you know, what happened in their lives, you know, that and I look at that as they were doing the right thing. They were going along the path that God had for them. And so he blessed that, and he blessed their lives. And God just used them in an extraordinary way, and especially Tammy. I mean, Jim, of course, also, but Tammy had a wider appeal, I believe, than Jim did. Everyone was always interested in Tammy. You know, I remember when people would come to Heritage USA and Tammy would not be there, she'd be on vacation or something, people were hugely disappointed. I mean, they were upset, you know, and which I considered that kind of being carnal. You know, they were missing the message that Tammy was trying to give out. But I understood it too. But I think she just saw herself as just an average gal, you know, who the Lord gave opportunities to, and she just happened to know what to do with those opportunities, you know, and how to use them well.
I know. I think this is definitely true.
Tammy was a great communicator, you know, and she could communicate well, not with just the masses, but with one-on-one, you know. So I've seen her sit and talk to people, and you know, be laughing with her girlfriends, you know. She talked about her children a lot. She loved Jamie Charles and I'm sorry, Jane.
It's okay.
I like to call Jay now.
That's all right.
She loved her children. She's especially proud of Jay and what he was doing, because he was doing something so different and no one else was really doing it, just a few people. And she was really concerned for Tammy Sue. She's, you know, she hurt for Tammy Sue. She was always looking for opportunities for Tammy Sue, and she got me in on that too, to help her with that. And I was able to open a few doors for Tammy Sue. And but yeah, she was good with a lot of different type of people, you know, and she just saw herself as just a girl. I mean, you know, she just saw herself as a normal person, really, I think, you know. So she wasn't really any different from any of us, really. You know, she has a lot of the same struggles the rest of us do, and she had accomplishments, and she dealt with life very well. I really think Tammy is one of the most successful people I've ever met in my life. Even though she had a lot of problems in her life, she dealt with those problems very well. Very, very well.
Absolutely. It's interesting what you say about how she didn't seek out fame originally. And I know that, you know, she struggled with anxiety and stuff with the extent of the reach to PTL and how much she was working. And she frequently said that, you know, she felt like Jim was pushing the envelope too much, and she kind of would rather be with Jay and Tammy Sue at home and what have you. But it, you know, that must have been a real struggle for her to have that calling and being so good at what she was doing, but also to just never have anticipated it, never to be seeking out the spotlight, really. But yeah, no, it's
there was a change in, like, I think it might have been 83 or 84. The program wasn't so much spiritual anymore as it was kind of entertaining. And with all the building projects that were going on, you know, Jim having to raise a lot of money and stuff. And I think that's where, you know, things really started to change, you know. But I know she wanted to get back to the original purpose, you know. I know that she felt like it was too much all the time with the way Jim wanted to take the ministry. His dreams were wonderful dreams, you know, but I think it was going a little bit too fast with it, you know. So
yeah, absolutely.
And especially for her, you know, I think it was too fast.
And the building projects and the having to raise $2 million a week, and
there you are. Okay,
oh, sorry,
signal for a moment. Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying that the $2 million a week having to raise. But I mean, it's just enormous, and this was in 1980s money, so I don't know how much that would be today, at least double. And yeah,
that's a lot of money.
It's interesting, though, you know, as you said, they're really normal people, and they weren't, you know, hugely wealthy as a result of this, you know, but the amount of money that they had to raise that went through PTL was huge. And I think that in the public imagination, or the, you know, the media imagination, maybe led people to judge Jim and Tammy personally, when actually they really didn't profit. And we've talked about this on this podcast, you know, how the fact that they didn't take their royalties, which would have been double the amount of the salary that they took during this period of time where they were accused of being, you know, so extravagant or whatever. So they actually gave back double to the ministry than they
Right.
took a salary. So, and you know, I love this when you were looking through Tammy's archive and Heritage Day and her jewelry box, and how so much of the jewelry is just cardboard with rhinestones glued on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She loved making her own jewelry. You know, it was always craft time with mom, you know. And sometimes she would take really nice rings and then put something crazy on them. Like, what are you doing, mom?
So what do you think, Keith, about the fact that there is this renewed interest in Tammy today? What do you make of this sort of 2022, 2023 revival of Tammy?
Well, I think it's great, actually, because I think it corrects some of the misunderstandings that the media put out there on her. I think a lot of people are learning about her who had not known about her in the past, but also the people who were living during that time are learning that some of what they saw on television on the evening news and stuff wasn't actually what was really going on, you know, or the truth, you know, that there was the people on the other side, you know, Falwell's camp that was putting out misinformation and all, and which is a sad thing to say, but that happened. And I'm glad it's being corrected, you know, and that people are starting to see the true Tammy Faye and understanding her better than they did, you know, in the past. So
That's really great. I know in a little bit I'll have to jump off, but I was just curious, anyone else have any like final thoughts before we come to a close?
Jay, I'll let you go first. Or
You want me to close?
Jay,
No,
yeah,
I think
do the benediction.
I think what's really great though is you know, about this podcast is that we're able to kind of see my you know, my mom through other people's eyes, but people who've known her and through different ideas of just, I think there's, you know, one of the things my mom really believed in, and both my dad really believed in as well, it was redemption, you know, and that it all works out and, you know, it's going to work out, you know, God's not through, you know, and it's that kind of thing. It's like, even here we are, what, 15, 16 years after my mom's passed, and we're seeing redemption from really unlikely places, from, you know, like starlets in Hollywood to like Elton John and doing this play in London. And then, you know, now we've got this chance, we're doing this documentary and then we're doing this podcast. And it's been really a great experience for me just to just reconnect with the life that she lived and who she really was. And I hope for a lot of folks, as we were saying, is that people are going to reconnect to that and kind of encourage them to live their life in a different way and see people differently. Like I thought about like that documentary about Sinead O'Connor that recently came out, and how everybody was like, oh, well, she was right. And we just, you know, that we just learned to think a little bit differently. And I think what my mom would love for her life. I think she would be completely like complex that we're all still talking about her and examining her life and things like that. I think she would, you know, find joy in that, but I think she would also find it complex because she did feel like she was sometimes just this simple woman, but she really wasn't. And it's kind of great to be able to celebrate that.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Keith, for coming on. I mean, I'm inspired to just, as you were saying, just be a little bit more open and a little bit better of a friend to my neighbors, to people in my life. That's, I don't know, it sounds simple, but I think it can be quite profound.
It can be profound. I mean, sometimes it's a hard thing to do, though. Like
Yes.
Dealing with someone like within your own family, maybe a drug addict or something.
Sure.
Kind of abuse your family and all within the family, but she does set an example for all of us, and I've learned from her, and I'm grateful for what she's taught me and for what she's taught many others. I know it's just not myself, but you know, there was a lot of us who was close to her in her life, and we saw the real Tammy Faye, and she really, Jay's right. She was simple, but yet she really wasn't. She was a very complex person. She was just a wonderful person. She had so many gifts, and you know, she was a blessing to our lives, and I miss her tremendously. So.
Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank y'all
you
guys
so much, Keith.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Keith. It was good
Thank you
to
so much.
see you again and touch
Okay.
bases with you.
All right, thanks, Jay. If I get
Yeah.
to Seattle, Portland again or Vancouver, I'll try to meet up with you in Seattle.
Okay, that'd be fantastic.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Okay,
Lots of love.
bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you,
Bye
everybody.
bye.